before the end of his life, was Charlie Kirk beginning to turn on the nation of Israel, on his support for Israel? Was it wavering? I'm going to take a look at this today, and I want to be as charitable and careful as possible. And I would start it off by saying I am a person that would most likely align as closely as possible with Charlie Kirk. And I think towards the end of his life, and especially as more things are coming to light, that you can see underneath the surface, his wavering of Israel was undeniable. But you have to be very nuanced and careful with this. It's not like he didn't stop loving Israel. Just like I love Israel and I support Israel and I'm for Israel. But if you are not lockstep with Israel publicly, they will disown you. They will try to destroy you in certain instances. And I think Charlie was very aware of that. He had donors. He did not want to piss anyone off. But as we see, that we're going to take a look at this, a clip from Megyn Kelly's show, and she describes Tucker Carlson and Tucker and Charlie at an event, and you could see that she has on video of Charlie telling Tucker to be as vocal as possible, say what I can't say, pretty much, was what he insinuated. He said, we'll actually just take a look at it here. He said, go Max, go Max. But here's Tucker describing that you can speak about any other foreign agency or foreign government, but you can't talk about Israel.
Epstein clearly had contact with Israeli intelligence and American intelligence and French intelligence, but the only one you're not allowed to talk about is Israeli intelligence. But it seemed true to me, and I had done some work on that. I knew a bunch of people pretty close to that story, so I thought that. And I said that to Charlie, and I said, but I'm not going to say that because I don't want to make your donors mad. I know it's just going to be like an endless flurry of text telling you to stop or you're going to lose a bunch of funding. And he looked at me, I'll never forget it, and said, go all the way. Do it. Go all the way. I said, man, a lot of things I can talk about. I don't need to talk about that. And he said, do it. So I did it.
And here's the thing, Stu. I was recently going through some old pictures.
I want to stop right there for a second. You can see that this is, everybody is starting to talk about this issue. And I think Israel does not give a fuck about anything at this point. They don't care. I support and I love Israel, but they don't care. They don't care who they piss off. They don't care, because you have to be totally bought in with them or they're not going to give you the time of day. And that's why there's so many things that people are saying that are clear about them that they just don't want to hear. But then there's also people that are taking it to the extreme. And I think that like the pinpoint accuracy people that are doing this is Nick Fuentes and Ben Shapiro. Those are the guys on both ends. And it's like you have to either pick one or the other, and I don't think you do. But it is clear that the support of Israel that is within the Christian community, it is wavering. I think we're finding ourselves, because so many things changed from when we were like for 2,000 years. I think if we really dive into the Bible, and I see the Bible as it doesn't, like when Jesus comes, it's a new chapter or whatever, or it kind of is, but the flow of the Bible, it is one book, Old Testament to New. We've just separated it like that. But if we look at the people of Israel, the people that are of Israel that are in power, they have not embraced Jesus. They don't believe he was the Messiah. So they're operating solely from the vantage point of what we would consider the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, Israel was given the land. They were told to wipe everyone out, and they operated like they're prophets, like Samson. Like it glorifies, of when he destroyed people and like him killing people, it glamorizes it and glorifies it as it happening because he was doing God's will. And I sincerely believe he was doing God's will. But there was a shift that happened when Jesus came. There was a shift, and you can see that in the lives of his apostles. James and John, they're saying, when the Samaritans or this village he's going to go through, they're not recognizing Jesus as the Messiah, and they're not giving him his due respect. And James and John are like, hey, Jesus, do you want us to call on God so we can cast down fire upon him like Elisha did in the Old Testament? Because there's this crazy story in the Old Testament, and I get it mixed up between, I think it's Elisha that it happens with, that these soldiers keep coming up to him, and he's up on this mountain, and they keep saying, oh, man of God, come down from here. And he keeps saying, if I am a man of God, may fire come down and consume you. And then it does, and it happens over and over, and more people come. And then they're like, finally, okay, just come down. We're sorry. And the apostles were operating from that viewpoint, that this is them, and people of Israel today would see that as well. But Jesus, when he came, he said, you don't know what spirit you are of. And that's why there was a shift, a change that happened when he came. There was something unique that changed in the purpose, the plan of God when he came. But let's move that aside. Let's continue on a little bit more, because we're going to actually see. So we see what Tucker and Megyn Kelly, what they've discussed, and what they discussed with Charlie. There was a change in his viewpoint of this as well. I want to continue a little bit further.
Find one of me and Charlie that I knew we took at that event. And not only did I find pictures of me and Charlie, but I found a video of me, Tucker, and Charlie speaking backstage right before Tucker went out. Tucker and I were talking. Charlie came over and interrupted for just a second. And you can hear him on this tape, which I've listened to many times. It's very clear on my phone, less clear here probably as we play it. But he says to Tucker, go Max. He interrupts the conversation because he has to say to Tucker something. And what was so important to him to tell Tucker was, go Max. Here it is.
Okay, you couldn't really hear that at all, especially if you're just listening, but it was Charlie Kirk, him, Tucker, and Megyn Kelly at this event, and Charlie was explicitly saying, go Max. There was things happening underneath the surface where of this criticism of Israel. And we don't need to just criticize for criticism's sake, but just talking about it, airing it out, just discussing really what's on our mind, what's on my mind. Not that we have, because I've always been like, I fall into that camp of like the Ted Cruz, where I support Israel because I think biblically we should support them because they are God's people. An event happened, a change happened where God turned towards the nations, but it didn't change the covenant with Israel that God has and will have. But it's easy to fall into one of two camps. I'm a diehard. I support everything Israel does. I cannot see anything wrong in them, or you're just overly critical, and you go way too far off of that extreme. And I know it's not the funnest thing because you want to hear things that are extreme. You don't want to hear rational, reasonable sides. That's why moderate, independent thinking seems kind of boring. You want tribal instinct. Devouring your enemies. It's easy and fun to be a part of a team, as opposed to let's look at this clearly and with clear eyes. Both sides are going to take you off on one end or the other, and then you're going to fall off a cliff. If you go one way or the other, you're going to fall off a cliff. So I think we can be very nuanced on this, of our discussion of this. I'm going to continue a little bit further with what Megyn Kelly, because you should check out her show. Her channel on YouTube, she's got so much good stuff. She's putting out there a lot of things. She seems like an even-minded person. She's been doing this forever. And you can see that Israel is getting underneath her skin in certain instances. I think of her and Patrick Bet-David and guys like that, vocally and outwardly, they're supporting Israel. Like, I support Israel. But it's not to say that everything they do is perfect. And I think Megyn Kelly, they're turning the people that are most just generous in their thinking and have overwhelmingly given support to them, but it's not enough. It's not enough because Israel, since they are the chosen nation, since the Bible is about them, that is their work. That's their, you want to go into somebody's house and find a history of their family, a family tree of everything about their life. That's Israel's book. We have taken it as the world, and Jesus, it came for the world, but he came first to the nation of Israel. He came first to his people. And Jesus said some stuff that would not be politically correct in our climate, in our day and age. He called the Gentiles, they consider them dogs. He said it's not right for us to give the bread of the children, talking about Israel, and give it to the dogs, giving it to the Gentiles. Because that's what they consider us. But Jesus, being God incarnate, he sees a bigger picture. The whole Bible is about, God's mercy and grace and generosity towards all of the world. But then Israel is very tight-knit because they want to keep it for themselves. They don't want it to overflow into the rest of the world in some instances. And that was the offense of the cross. If you really want to boil it down, that was the offense of the cross when we get into it, because that was when people talk in the Bible, in the New Testament, Paul, he says, otherwise the offense of the cross, it loses it, because it's the inclusion of the nations in this divine plan of God. Israel wants to keep that uniqueness and that chosenness to themselves. They don't want it to overflow to everyone else. And so Paul and the apostles preaching a message that anyone can be a part of this kingdom, everyone, and they don't need to come under the authority of Judaism. They don't need to come under the authority of the Israel people and become Jewish. That was the struggle of the New Testament. That was the struggle of the New Testament, that the inclusion of Gentiles is what caused the Jewish people to follow Paul around, who is a Jew himself, but they followed him from town to town and tried to destroy him because he was preaching this message of all it takes is believing Jesus. That's the message. Anyone could come in. Jews remain Jews, Gentiles remain Gentiles. All right, but there's so much going on, and I think Megyn Kelly's doing a great job espousing this, putting this forward so people can see it and decide for themselves. Because I think, Charlie, I would be of the opinion, I like a lot what Nick Fuentes is doing, but I don't align completely with Nick Fuentes. He's saying a lot of truth. He's saying a lot of things, and he's pulling it to the extreme. He's maybe giving it all the gusto he has so that this can be a conversation. But I would align more with Charlie. I love Israel. I support Israel. They are God's nation, and we are to try to make the Jews jealous by bringing more people to Christ. And that's what the Apostle Paul did. He tried to bring more people to Christ, and so it would make the Jews jealous, and so that they would turn to their Messiah. So, all right, we'll leave it at that. Follow me on X and Instagram at Brandon Fogel. Share this video with everyone. Like it. Subscribe to this channel. We'll see you in the next one.